Hi, my name is Andy Ashdown. I am playing the role of Jonathan Harker in Dracula. And Jonathan is very much an everyman. He is looking forward to getting married to his fiancée, but he just needs to go to Transylvania and sort out, this little property deal with an elderly aristocrat first. And, I'm sure nothing's going to happen there. What's going to happen? So this will be my third show on stage with Quick as a Wink. The first one I was in was Faith County, which was all the way back in March of 2017. And the previous one was the one just before this one. It was Baskerville back in March of 2019. This one's a little bit different though, because it's the first time I'm not sort of playing a comedic role. And I've been on and off stage for about 20 years, and this is pretty much the most serious role I've ever done, so I'm quite excited. It's an interesting challenge. Well, my favourite scary story, to the extent that I can actually sort of quote the opening paragraph of the book, is The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson, which I believe was published sometime in the 1950s. As for movies, there's a huge number that I like. Probably the one that I like the most though is the movie Alien, which, yeah. A quote I read about that recently was that, obviously people enjoy being scared, otherwise they would never do it twice. So people obviously enjoy scary movies, they enjoy roller coasters, they enjoy that sensation of being scared, being thrilled in what is essentially a safe environment. I think as well that sometimes horror can reflect elements of our own world back at us through a sort of glass darkly, if you like. And that can really help people sort of process things and sort of deal with things. Well, I think there's two reasons. First reason is that I think a large part of it is actually down to luck. It's published in 1895, and then over the next sort of 25, 30 years ago, two things happened. First is that sort of movies became sort of huge and mainstream, and obviously, they're going to adapt things which are fairly recent to the screen, much like they do today. And I think the other thing that happened is obviously the First World War. And it seems like horror seems to really take off in the aftermath of wars. So you have sort of the universal horror boom after the First World War. After the Second World War, you have sort of Hammer films. After Vietnam, you have sort of all the things like The Shining and The Thing and all this kind of thing. So I think that it was sort of in the right place at the right time. The second reason, I think, is that it's a great example of what Stephen King calls external horror or outside horror. Essentially he splits it into two types. There's internal horror and there's external horror. Internal horror is essentially driven by the characters, by their flaws, that kind of thing. External horror is more like walking across a field and having a meteorite land on your head. It's sort of this outside force comes in and sort of lands on people and destroys their lives or does something like that. And that's what Dracula is. He's just this outside force that comes in and just rains down on these people. Like Harker, for instance, he goes to Dracula's castle. He doesn't go there because he's been driven by some kind of internal conflict. He goes there because his boss tells him to. And he could have easily just sent someone else and probably the same thing would have happened to them. And I think that people find that effective because if it could happen to anyone, it could happen to them. And I think that that's like the great sort of advantage of external horror. The other great advantage of external horror is that it can be quite grandiose and quite sort of, you can have these big outside scary things which have this huge mythology behind them. And Dracula is nothing if not that. I do, yes. There's a few that are more sort of traditional vampire movies. So, What We Do in the Shadows, one of my favourite comedy films, and there's a very, very funny TV series done recently. There's a fantastic one from I think 2013 called Only Lovers Left Alive. There's one from Iran called A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night. Thematically, having mentioned it earlier, I actually think Alien is quite an interesting take on the themes and ideas of vampire without sort of the same trappings, in that it is kind of this creature that likes darkness. It's quite bat-like, and it's not the worst thing that can happen. Like, well, the worst thing that can happen is not it killing you, it's turning you into more of it. And I think that that really is at the heart of Dracula, is that it sort of takes everything out of you and sort of turns you into this shell which is superficially charming but actually sort of a vicious monster. And in Alien they kind of get rid of the superficially charming part and it's just a vicious monster, which I think is very interesting. I think Alien is almost like a vampire story if the character of Van Helsing never turned up. He's just, they don't know what they're dealing with, they never really find out, and it's horrible. I really hate wasps. I know that they're an important part of the ecosystem, I know that they do things, I know they're not completely pointless, but I just wish they would do it somewhere else other than near me. Please. And while we're at it, hornets as well. Can you just go away over there, please?